morning. I'm Ken Biberaj, and welcome to Coffee with Ken, a thought leadership series at the nexus of business and politics. Today, we are coming to you live from Scottsdale, Arizona, for a very special conversation with the 23rd governor of Arizona, Doug Ducey. Good to see you, Governor.
Good to see you, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Cheers.
Cheers.
Got some coffee for you. We're ready to go. So, Governor, this is my second trip recently to Arizona. And what's been fascinating as somebody in real estate who thinks about site selection, it seems like geography no longer matters. Everything's on the table. Austin, Miami, Nashville. Why Arizona?
Well, Ken, first I want to say we're thrilled to have you here. It's thrilled to have the audience here. Arizona really is booming right now, and we have focused on growing our business sector. I came from the private sector. Cold Stone Creamery was my company. I'm actually a lot more comfortable talking to business leaders than I am talking to many state legislators. I actually know what motivates or incents people in the private sector. We opened up ice cream stores in all 50 states, so I got a bit of a tutorial on the ease or difficulty of doing business in different parts of the country. I thought we had a great place to live, a great quality of life, a reputation that could be improved. We are in many ways a flyover state for companies and innovators going to places like Texas. I think we have a better place to live. Now we have better policy, lower taxes, lighter regulation down the line. So I think people are choosing Arizona, one, because it's welcoming and inviting, but two, it is a great place to raise a family, get an education, and scale a business.
So let's talk about over the last 8 years. You're coming to the end of your second term. What has been your strategy to diversify the economy?
My strategy has always been an all-of-the-above strategy. I mean, I'm thrilled today that we're seen as a leader in things like semiconductors, electric vehicles, hydrogen technology, battery manufacturing. But I came from the service sector, and anyone that wants to get up in the morning and go to work, I honor that person. I honor that decision. So I think a great economy has opportunities for all. That was actually the theme of the 2014 campaign, is that if you want to work, Arizona's going to have a place for you to work. One thing I heard when I ran initially from many of my friends, some in this room, is that I love Arizona. I'm not leaving Arizona, but my kid just graduated from you pick the university, and they can't apply that degree in Arizona. Well, I haven't heard that for 5 years now. I mean, anybody that wants a job, regardless of their skill level, education, or technical expertise, can find a high-paying, high-tech job here.
Yeah. Well, let's stay on that topic for a second, right? Like, the hunt for talent is the most important thing any company is thinking about. So the educational system you have here, the universities, talk about the talent base. Like, what would companies get by coming to Arizona, expanding here, relocating here? What's the talent story?
Arizona State University has been called the most innovative university in the nation for the last 7 years running. Actually, the first year that it was named the most innovative university, I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, on stage with Governor Charlie Baker, and I was able to congratulate him on Harvard's second-place finish. So we have.
He loved that, right?
He did love it, and Michael Crow's taken that engineering school from 6,000 to 27,000 young people in the engineering school. Bobby Robbins is doing similar things at the University of Arizona. We've got NAU in Flagstaff, and then Grand Canyon University is a real innovation in private education here in the state of Arizona. So not only are we developing our own homegrown talent, we've put more money into K-12 education over the last 7 years than any other state in the nation, but it's more than just the money, it's the investment and the return in math, reading, science, and American civics. We're the fastest growing state in the country, fastest growing metropolitan area in the nation. Americans vote with their feet, and that talent is flocking to Arizona.
Let's talk a little bit about the energy story. I mentioned we have an exciting client in Tucson, 1,200 acres. It will be a renewable energy power plant. Talk about that renewable story, about innovation, about less reliance on fossil fuels, diversifying our energy access, increasing competition. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, is this something you want Arizona to be leading on? Where are you headed?
Well, I think there's a void in leadership, and I think we have the opportunity to lead on it, to, one, be welcoming to these different technologies. I think that great states have great cities, and that's plural. That's multiple. In many ways, Maricopa County had an embarrassment of riches, and I've always thought that Tucson is an incredible place to live. Many people prefer to live there. Our relationship with Mexico was not in a good place in 2014. So as a business person, I wanted to go with people that we were already working with. You can always expand your customer base working with a current customer. So my first international trip upon election was to Mexico City. No chief executive from Arizona in government had been there nearly a decade. My first international trip upon re-election was to Mexico City. So that opening of the trade corridor with Tucson, as well as offering it as an opportunity in terms of headquarter, distribution, supply chain, and having business leaders like Bill Kelly and Jim Click and other individuals down there that want to work with individuals has, I think, helped transform Southern Arizona and Pima County as well.
I mean, the natural resources are pretty incredible. Talk a little bit about, as we think about innovation related to EV, batteries, a lot of that requires mining, right? So what are your thoughts on mining for resources, on the water story in Arizona? Talk a little bit about how you leverage these amazing resources to kind of continue to innovate and grow.
In my second State of the State, I said I'd be remiss if I didn't thank my partner in growing Arizona's economy, and that was then California Governor Jerry Brown. Now, he didn't get quite the kick out of it that the audience did, but I would have never in a million years thought that Gavin Newsom would be an even more valuable partner. I mentioned this
you
year.
Love friendly competition, huh?
Well, there is a competition among states. And like I said, Americans vote with their feet, and they go where they feel life is better, and they have a better opportunity to improve their situation and station. Ronald Reagan said, had the Pilgrims discovered America on the West Coast, they would have never bothered to find the rest of the country. Yet today, and I point this out because I think policy matters, nobody wants to leave California. They leave for a reason, and these policies matter. So the fact that we have lower taxes, lighter regulation, better education, more affordable and accessible universities, and that we have an individual in Michael Crow that judges the university by who he can include versus who he can exclude, really builds this dynamic ecosystem that we have, and that allows us to look across the board on energy, on water, on other things that are necessary. No state in the country is better on water than Arizona. I mean, think about it right now. We're in the 5th largest metropolitan area in the country, the fastest growing in the middle of a desert. And everyone that's moving here is planting a front lawn and digging a pool. We're working with our agricultural industry on drip migration. We're working with Mexico on a desalination project that will assure Arizona's water future for the next 100 years. So the future is very bright here.
So you've been the chief executive of the state. You've been the chief executive of Cold Stone Creamery. Talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each and what lessons you brought from the private sector to the public sector.
Well, I think for anyone that's considering public life, for me, this has been a gift to do this in the second part of my career, to have some subject matter expertise before I ran for office. But the job is very similar. I mean, a CEO sets the vision, charts the course, picks the people, and prioritizes next steps. I do think leading Cold Stone Creamery and working with the franchise community was good preparation for working with the state legislature. And, you know, the legislature is a co-equal branch, and that's how I have treated them the entire time. And anything that you're happy with that I've been able to achieve as governor, I couldn't have done without that legislature. This is a business of persuasion. And if you believe you have a better idea, you have to convince the public. You have to convince a majority in both the House and Senate to do that. That's not always the easiest thing to do. But I think also, I haven't been removed from the private sector that long to know that you don't command and control there either. You're working with human beings, you're bringing along leaders, and they want to have input and responsibility in the decisions.
So I think just last weekend, you were at the McCain Institute for an event. Last week, I was at an event in Washington with the Center for the Study of the Presidency, and Lisa Murkowski was speaking and Angus King. And they both remarked at how polarized things are today. and how each remembers you used to get credit for working across the aisle and with other folks, and today it's almost like a risk. It's almost like it's going to hurt you if you do. What do you think of the state of our democracy in general and the need to work across the aisle and solve big problems?
I do think we're divided and we're polarized, at least more than any time in my adult lifetime. Of that, there's no doubt. I do think most of what you see is in Washington, D.C., and you do see it in the national electorate. Yet I'll tell you, governors are collegial. Governors collaborate. We just got through the COVID-19 pandemic. I was on multiple conference calls with governors from around the country, both Republican and Democrat. When we have a wildfire, Gavin Newsom sends us wildland firefighters, and we do the same for he and Jared Polis, who are both members, Colorado's governor, of the other party. So I do think if we could help break up the cartel in Washington, D.C. They're trying to answer every question for every person in a one-size-fits-all, top-down solution. I find the states as laboratories of democracy. I mentioned how we're collaborative and collegial, but at the end of the day, what we really are is competitive. And I want to outdo these individuals, like I said, with a better place to live. When we can land a Taiwan Semiconductor or a Lucid or a Nikolai or Electromechanica, that's a win for Arizona. These are organizations that probably look at 15 to 20 states, up to 60 to 80 markets before they make a decision. And Arizona has been winning the lion's shares of these competitive situations. So this fever will break at some point. 92% of the legislation passed in Arizona has been bipartisan. But at the same time, I say that it's not to compromise or to split the baby. I've had an agenda that I've run on. That's what I believe is the best direction for the state. I've thought it's my job to be the chief spokesperson and salesperson, and then look at the evidence, look at the results. That's how I want to be judged.
I've always thought a role like governor really is a chief salesperson, right? I mean, as much time you spend in the state, you need to be spending out of the state to try to recruit the talent and the companies. How do you think your private sector experience may have set you up better than maybe some other states to get out there and chase business? And how often are you out there? I mean,
well, I do think the private sector experience is invaluable. I mean, just the skill to get elected and reelected is not really much of a valuable skill except to be in office. It's what you can do when you're in office. And I do prefer to do these meetings. I think our first big success was with Lucid Motors, and I had met with them 3 times before we actually closed the deal. And once I realized, and I can say this now because I'm in my final year, once I realized that other governors weren't out doing these interviews, I would ask, well, how did your visit go with the governor of you fill in the state? Well, I didn't meet with the governor of the state. Well, here's my personal cell phone. Just know you're going to have that kind of responsiveness. And I just think those kind of small touches, which we all do in the private sector, for whatever reason, people don't do it in the public sector, really does make a difference.
yeah, you got to show up. You got to be there.
You got to show up. You got to be there. The other thing is, and I don't want you to think I'm beating up on these guys because I'm not. But you know, governors we all have pretty much the same problems to solve, and we'll share best practices. And that's what some of these governors' meetings are for. One of the more recent ones, Kate Brown from Oregon, at a lunch said, let's go around the table. Where do you go for economic development? And at the time, this is before things broke bad, some people were going to Beijing, some people were going to Shanghai, some were going to Taiwan, some were going to Seoul, South Korea. When it came to me, I said, I go to Silicon Valley. And we really have done that. We have gone to people that are looking to leave other places. And here we have Taiwan Semiconductor that has actually selected Arizona for its largest international project. And I don't know if you've seen this in North Phoenix. It's really hard to get your head around the scope and size and scale of this. 667,000 square foot fabs, and they're building 20 of them. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the border. I mean, I feel like every time you have a conversation about the border, it's usually in a negative sense. What are the positives of being on the border with the U.S. and Mexico?
Well, when the border is secure, and it has been secure in the last several years, it is a force multiplier for Arizona. Let me say right now the border is not secure. It is in crisis. I feel like the federal government is derelict in its duty. This is a humanitarian crisis on what's happening at the border, but it's also a public safety and national security crisis. So right now, the advantages are hard to see, yet we will address this. Myself and Greg Abbott from Texas are doing everything we can from the public safety part at the state level. And I think when you look at Texas and Arizona, you see some of the similar success in our trade relationship with Mexico. Mexico is our number one trading partner by far, 4 times anyone else. That's why I did those visits. We are the front door to America's economy when it's done properly. And of course, there's also trade and tourism. Canada is our number 2 trading partner, and that's something that we've worked on. Glenn and I were able to go to Montreal, and they've just reconvened their direct flight to Phoenix twice a week, and that was a result of that meeting. So I do think this idea of a prosperous North America means that we'll have a more peaceful United States. These are our neighbors. They're not moving. We should go out of our way to build these strong relations with them. And then what we've seen through COVID and what we're experiencing right now with the supply chain, to me, is a clarion call for urgency to repatriate manufacturing to North America. Of course, I prefer to have it in Arizona, if not Arizona, one of the other 49 states. And if not those 49 states, choose Mexico or Canada. Our supply chain will not be interrupted. Our neighbors will be more prosperous. And this will also help lessen the crisis at the border.
So let's drill down on that specifically a little bit. I mean, I think it's all the beer that comes to the United States comes through Tucson, right? I mean, you are a centrally located hub. Home Goods has now put their big distribution facility in Tucson. There's a lot happening. How do you keep up with the demand? I think the vacancy rate for industrial is like 2 to 3% in Phoenix. It's one of the hardest places to actually do more distribution industrial. So how do you kind of get across the state building more to meet the kind of supply chain, reshoring demands, manufacturing? It's all live time kind of evolving at a time where I think the public sector traditionally has seen sites like this as something to rezone for multifamily or to upzone. But in reality, it seems like we need more of it than ever before.
Well, I think you've identified exactly what the solution is. I think some people are concerned because the last time we had an economy like this, it was the 2006, 2007 timeframe, but that was a bubble. This is a supply and demand situation, so what we need is more supply. So you're going to see a lot of building across the board. Of course, we need more homes, we need more apartments, but what's happening in the private sector and the business community, from industrial to commercial to even office in this situation of time of remote work, we need it across the board. So I think Arizona is really set up not for a boom year, but for a boom decade.
Interesting. So your term's almost over. So in November, there's going to be an election. January, there'll be a new governor. What's your future hold?
Well, first I want to say I want to finish strong here. I've got 240 plus days in this job.
Who's counting?
There's well, I have that there because I want to take advantage of every moment. We completed the tax cut. Arizona today has the lowest flat tax in the nation at 2.5%. That's on top of the largest tax reduction in state history. And today we sit on a $5.2 billion surplus. So we're going to be investing in K-12 education. I'm leaving this event to go cut the ribbon on the I-10 expansion. We have the opportunity for a 100-year water project with Mexico, which we're working on. So these are all things I want to complete. I'm also leading the Republican Governors Association. My peers have asked me to be chairman. We have 36 races over this cycle in our most important and competitive states, places like Florida, Georgia, Texas, Ohio, and even Arizona. And I want to hand the baton to a worthy successor here. I came from the private sector. I can happily return to the private sector. I have enjoyed being part of this cause. Governor is the job that I wanted. It's a great job. You are the chief executive. You're home in the morning, you're home at night, and you've got an adventure all day long.
So let's wind down a little bit on foreign policy. There was news out of Russia that there was a prisoner swap recently, and I think you still have a WNBA Phoenix Mercury star still there. Are you involved in that stuff? Are you tracking it? What's your kind of assessment there? And then more broadly, how have you approached foreign policy? I mean, obviously with Mexico, but beyond.
Well, first, I want to say we want to bring Brittany home. Okay, we want to bring all Americans back to America. What Vladimir Putin is doing is despicable. John McCain, you mentioned the McCain Institute this past weekend. John McCain called Vladimir Putin a murderer and a thug, and that still stands. And he was one of the few national leaders that was actually accurate on him. So from a foreign policy perspective, we're seeing NATO come together on this. We're seeing our trading partners doing everything they can. It was, I think, less than 6 weeks ago, we had Vladimir Kara-Murza in my office. He's a Russian dissident that is outspoken against Vladimir Putin. He's incredibly courageous. He returned to Russia, and they arrested him for the things that he said to the Arizona legislature. So he's in a gulag at this time. So I think, for one thing, it's a time for us to reflect on how fortunate we are to be in our country, in a free nation, the leader of the world on this. I know we are divided and we've been fighting among ourselves, but we're seeing what can happen around the world. We've grown up in a time of great peace, prosperity, and security for our nation, and it is being threatened today in Ukraine. So we stand with Ukraine. We're doing everything we can from the state level. We sent over bulletproof vests and protective materials that we had in surplus here. I know other governors are doing that as well, along with what our Congress is doing in terms of things that would be modeled after the Lend-Lease Act or the Berlin Airlift. And I think it's important we stay persistent and stay focused. Sometimes our attention can wane in the West, but this is a very important battle. And I want to say the respect for Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, the resilience of these people, their neighbors that are taking in the migrants that are fleeing. This is all something that should continue to capture the world's attention, and we should complete this until it's finished. Vladimir Putin should retreat back into Russia and be defeated.
Governor Ducey, thanks for being on Coffee with Ken. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
For being here, and you can always tune in at coffeewithken.com and look forward to future sessions. Thanks so much, folks.